starting off this countdown, we have Kennecott. And I'm sorry in advance if I say any of these names wrong. I suck at pronunciation. We've been through this. Located in Alaska, this city was once filled with millions of dollars worth of copper ore. So when copper ore was first discovered on the land, workers set out to create a mine and track system. However, during this construction, tons of individuals lost their lives. Then when the mine was opened, tons of miners also lost their lives. Miner 49er, sorry, I just thought of that, it's from Scooby-Doo. Miner 49er. Man. This is when the haunting started. People in the mines reported hearing cries for help from the dead miners, and their tools would mysteriously vanish into thin air. Another creepy thing that would happen is tombstones would just suddenly disappear. Apparently travelers would see tombstones while passing through, and on their way back, the tombstones would be completely gone, as if someone just pick them up and move them, which is physically impossible. The city then got a haunted reputation, which scared out most of the residents. In our 9th spot, we have Mystic, South Dakota. This city first started off as a small creekside camp in 1876. Then over the years, the place began to expand. In 1885, it had a post office. By 1889, it had a rail line, and around 1906, it had a whole import and export system going on. But sadly, the town was hit by a bunch of floods that destroyed their bridges and rail lines. Then the town's sawmill burned down. But no matter what tragedy hit them, they kept rebuilding and recovering, and then they kept getting destroyed. It was just like a perpetual cycle. And then it was the end of the World War II, and the town didn't have enough resources to keep them going, and so the residents fled. But now, legend goes that the town is cursed, and that's why so many bad things happen there. In our 8th spot, we have Colemanskop. Back in the early 1900s, after the first diamond was found in the area, tons of people moved to this area in hopes of also discovering diamonds. The city then became a very bustling area. There was a casino, movie theater, and school. But sadly, by the 1950s, the diamond supply was depleted and a lot of people left the area and moved elsewhere to find more diamonds. Now the city is completely abandoned and most of the buildings are flooded with sand. And I'm not talking about just like a little bit of sand here. No, there's so much sand everywhere, it's tall enough to cover your knees, which makes chances to revive the town very unlikely. Moving on to number 7, we have North Brother Island. North Brother Island is a 20-acre island located in New York City's East River. The island once was home to Riverside Hospital, which was built to quarantine people with smallpox. Since the island was so isolated from others, they thought it would be perfect to house the sick there away from everyone. In fact, Typhoid Mary spent some time there herself. Mary Malone, otherwise known as Typhoid Mary, was a cook that worked for a bunch of different families. She got her name because she was an asymptomatic carrier of the typhoid germ. As a result, she infected 51 individuals and killed 3. She was then forced to live the rest of her life in isolation. Then in 1943, they used the hospital to house people with tuberculosis. But by the 60s, it was abandoned. Now the island stays that way and is off limits to the public. Coming in at number 6, we have Animas Forks. Animas Forks was once a popular mining town in Colorado. It was first inhabited in 1873, and 10 years later it was home to 450 residents. But in 1884 they were hit by a massive blizzard. The blizzard lasted 23 days and dumped 25 feet of snow on the town. In order to escape, the residents had to dig tunnels in the snow, and many people didn't want to return after that. By 1910, the last of the residents left the town after the last mine was closed. By the 1920s, it was considered a complete ghost town. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Ballestrino. This Italian town used to be known for its beautiful structures and buildings. Now they are sadly dilapidated and destroyed. During the 1860s, several earthquakes destroyed the buildings and scared off half of the residents. Then in 1953, the rest of the population was evacuated due to a series of earthquakes and landslides. Of course, because of this, the buildings are now cracked, they have collapsed walls, and they're too dangerous to enter. But oddly enough, one building and one building only still manages to remain in perfect condition, and that's the castle located at the top of a hill. It's quite odd how it's in great condition after all that. So it's thought that the castle is protected by some sort of magical force, but the rest of the town is too dangerous to visit. In our 4th spot we have Bannack. Founded in 1862, Bannack, Montana was once just a typical gold rush town. Now it's full of paranormal activity and was even featured in an episode of Ghost Adventures. So back in the day, gold was discovered in Virginia City, which made people move to Bannack, which was nearby, in hopes of finding gold for themselves. But this caused a lot of problems. The road that connected the two towns was targeted. A lot of people were robbed or murdered along that route by a gang. Over 100 people died in only a couple of months. And in the end, the man behind all of this and the leader of the gang was in fact the town's sheriff, Henry Plummer. Dun dun dun! That's some Scooby-Doo stuff right there. Now it's said that Henry's ghost haunts the town. So unless you want to be greeted by a ghost of a corrupt sheriff, don't go there. He's not a friendly ghost. Coming in at number 3 we have Virginia City. So like I just mentioned, Virginia City was known as a gold mining town, and a lot of people were killed over this gold. In fact, because the city was so small, they didn't have enough law enforcement or even a justice system. So murders were kind of the norm there. Doesn't sound like a safe place to me. Well, now it's said that the souls of the people that were murdered haunt the area. People have seen ghostly apparitions by the hanging house and by the cemetery. They also have heard mysterious voices coming from within the opera house. And one visitor was even locked inside of a room by a spirit. Now, if you are really that intrigued to visit this haunted location, they do offer tours every so often. So there you go. But make sure you bring your holy water and Bible because there's a lot of ghosts there. In our 2nd spot we have Dawson, New Mexico. This city has a very tragic past. So in 1906, Dawson's mines were purchased by the Phelps Dodge Corporation. But on October 22nd, 1913, an explosion occurred in the mine and around 263 miners were killed. Then on February 8th, 1923, another explosion occurred. 123 miners were killed in this explosion. In 1950, that's when the mines were finally shut down. Now to this day, one of the things that still remains in Dawson is a pile of white crosses. Those represent all the lives that were lost there. And of course, whenever a big tragedy occurs, the place is usually haunted right after. And this is true. Visitors have seen lights flickering on and off. The lights apparently look like the ones on a mining helmet, and they have heard whispers and voices or have even seen ghostly figures vanish right before their eyes. And in our number 1 spot we have Oradour-sur-Glane. Oradour-sur-Glane was once a beautiful place in France, until it was terrorized on June 10th, 1944. On that day, the village was the scene of one of the worst massacres of French civilians during World War II. So since the town supported the French resistance, opposing soldiers stormed in and killed 642 residents. Men were taken to barns and shot with machine guns, whereas women were locked inside of a church and killed with explosives. It was very gruesome. On top of that, they burnt down most of the houses. The entire town was destroyed and there were very little survivors. All that's left are burnt down ruins, bricks, rubble, charred storefronts, and rusted cars and bicycles. It's quite a disturbing sight, especially knowing the horrors that took place there. Starting off this countdown, we have Ruby, Arizona. Established in 1910, Ruby used to be a popular mining town. Now it's a popular and well-preserved ghost town. The population of this area started off small, but over the years it gradually increased. At its peak, it had a population of about 1,200 residents. Now, since the population number was so small, they really didn't have a proper law enforcement system. In fact, a lot of families were scared to live there. Between 1920 to 1922, Ruby and the surrounding area was the scene of 3 double homicides, known as the Ruby Murders. In 1920, 2 brothers were found shot in their store. One with a bullet in his head and his back, the other brother had been shot through his left eye. Then in 1921, the store's new owner was attacked, killed and their store was robbed. Then in 1940 the mine closed down, and the next year the town was pretty much abandoned. Coming in at number 9, we have New Idria, California. New Idria was once another popular mining area. However, over the years, mercury has been seeping into the water and ground, contaminating it. It's considered way too toxic for people to live there. On top of the mercury problem, they also have an asbestos problem. So yeah, EPA declared it not a safe area to be in, let alone live in. In our 8th spot, we have Tawerga, Libya. Back in 2011, residents of this town were forced to leave by resistance forces. Buildings were burnt and ransacked, and people's possessions were thrown about, littering the streets. There once was 30,000 people living there. Now it's home to no one, and the residents are never allowed to return home. This is one of the places you literally can't visit. The whole area is defended by a small military. You probably will be killed if you try to visit this area. Also, good luck finding it. Its main road is now erased from road signs, and there's no directional arrows telling you where to go. All that's left of this place are destroyed homes and lone cats and dogs. Moving on at number 7, we have Pyramiden, Norway, or as it is now called, the Soviet ghost town in the Arctic Circle. So way up in the Arctic Circle is Pyramiden. Probably said that wrong, I apologize. A once popular mining town. During World War II, this mining town was very successful. However, it fell following the downfall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Then the town was the site of a tragic accident. A plane crashed in the area, killing some of the residents. After that incident, the town could no longer support its residents, and by 1998, it was deserted. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place, and homes look like they are ready to welcome families back. But no one wants to step foot in an area where such a big tragedy occurred. In our 6th spot, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance. But more than 22 buildings are still unfinished, and there's no citizens working inside the big tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as being completely empty, and he says it's 10 times creepier at night. There's a bunch of brightly lit roads, but no one is driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards his car, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? He has no idea, but now he thinks that the area is haunted. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Forlandia, Brazil. In 1927, Henry Ford thought it would be a good idea to create a massive rubber plantation in the jungles of Brazil. He named it Fordlandia. He designed the town to have swimming pools, a golf course, and bungalows. He hoped to get a lot of rubber from the trees of the Amazon for car tires and such. But unfortunately, his whole plan failed. The trees ended up getting a leaf fungus, and then they died. Then his team and him kept getting into multiple disputes with the Brazilian laborers. So in 1945, he canceled the plans and sold it to the Brazilian government. All that remains are a couple of structures overgrown by nature. In our 4th spot, we have Pitcher, Oklahoma. Pitcher, Oklahoma was once a popular lead and zinc mining town. In fact, it was home to a number of families. But in the mid-90s, a third of the younger population suffered from lead poisoning, and they were experiencing cognitive issues. But they kind of just ignored that and continued living there until 2006. That's when it was discovered that 80% of the buildings were pretty much going to collapse at any time. In fact, one motorist died after driving into a huge hole in the ground. After they discovered that, the population dropped to only 20 people. People fled like crazy. They got the heck out of there. In our 3rd spot, we have Sanchi Pod City. Located just outside of New Taipei, this city is filled with pretty weird styled homes. These homes literally look like UFO pods stacked on top of each other. In fact, it has been nicknamed the UFO houses. So construction of the city began in 1978, and it was meant to be like a vacation resort area. But a lot of of bad things happened in the area, which stopped construction. Several fatal car accidents occurred near the construction sites, and then they lost a lot of investments, so the whole thing just came tumbling down. Now it's said that the area is cursed with bad luck. This is because they bisected a Chinese dragon statue near the front gates. By doing so, it's bad luck, and that's why the project was never finished. In our second spot, we have Kentubek, Uzbekistan, otherwise known as Asbestos Island. This area was where biological weapons were being tested out. One of the labs there worked with smallpox and the bubonic plague. In 1971, 10 people on the island contracted smallpox, and 3 died as a result of the testings. Then in 1988, when they banned biological weapons, they buried tons of anthrax spores in the area. In fact, it was considered the world's largest anthrax dumping grounds. Over the years, there have been attempts to decontaminate the area, but they still believe it's way too hazardous to live there. As a result, it lays abandoned. And in our number 1 spot, we have Ipetuan, Argentina. Ipetuan was once known as a perfect spa destination with its therapeutic thermal waters. In fact, since the lake was so rich in minerals, it was used to treat certain skin conditions, muscle pain, joint inflammation, and diabetes. But sadly, the area was hit hard with a bunch of rainstorms and floods. Following this, a dam broke which was protecting the area, and tons of water poured in. Residents said that they woke up to ankle-deep water in their home. The water level rose a centimeter each hour. 2 weeks later, it was 3 meters deep. By 1993, it was 10 meters deep. The village became uninhabitable and abandoned. It's said that the residents never fully recovered from the trauma of losing everything literally overnight. It's so sad. Now there are attempts to rebuild the area, but chances are nobody is going to move back to an area where the same thing could happen again. Starting off this countdown, we have St. Elmo. St. Elmo, originally known as Forest City, was once a very popular mining town in Colorado. They had about 2,000 people living there when the mines opened. However, in the early 1920s, the mining industry started to decline, and slowly people packed up and left. However, it's not completely abandoned. Apparently, a couple of people still live there, but it's said that this place is haunted. In fact, it's said that it is home to some of the most paranormal activity in the state. Maybe it's a good spot for paranormal investigators, but not the best area to live in. I mean, I wouldn't want ghosts for neighbors. I mean, maybe I would, if they were friendly ghosts that kept noise levels down, then sure. Moving on at number 9, we have Krakow, Italy. Krakow, Italy was founded in the 8th century. However, it now lays abandoned due to a series of destructive natural disasters. The first natural disaster occurred in 1963 when a bunch of landslides affected the area. This was a result of the city being built on a cliff 1,300 feet off of the ground, and they also had some sewer and water system issues. Then in 1972, a flood struck the area and made the whole situation worse. Then in 1980, there was an earthquake that left the city completely abandoned. Now, the only people you may catch there are film crews. It's a very popular filming location. Some scenes in the film Quantum of Solace were shot there. But the area itself is considered a ticking time bomb, and it's surrounded by a locked gate. Making our way down the list at number 8, we have the city underwater. You aren't going to be able to visit this next city unless you have access to scuba diving gear, because this city is now completely submerged underwater. Built 1,300 years ago, the city I'm referring to is Shai-Chang, also referred to as Lion City, and it's located in eastern China. In 1959, the city was purposely flooded to build a hydroelectric power station. Now it's referred to as China's Atlantis. What's pretty fascinating is that although it lays about 40 meters underwater, the buildings are still in pretty good shape. The only change is instead of having human residents, it's home to tons of aquatic life. Moving on to number 7, we have Cahaba, Alabama. Cahaba in Alabama was abandoned after suffering from seasonal flooding. In 1865, Cahaba was destroyed by a flood and then abandoned. After the flood, living there became relatively impossible, so residents had no choice but to leave. But then in the 1920s, an archaeologist started to uncover and preserve some of the structures. Now it's said that the area is very haunted. In fact, it's known for a ghostly orb that can be seen floating around only to vanish into thin air. So the citizens may no longer live there, but ghosts certainly do. In our 6th spot, we have Varosha, Cyprus. In the early 70s, Varosha was one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world. That was until 1974 when Turkey invaded Cyprus. As a result, the residents there fled for their lives. Some residents have told stories of pots being left on their stoves or things still left in their ovens. It's quite sad how they were forced out of their own home and not allowed to return. Since 1974, Varosha has been abandoned and under control of the Turkish military. The whole area is now fenced off and under constant supervision. If you try to break in, well, the army patrols have orders to shoot on sight. So don't even try to visit the city, it definitely will end badly. It's just such a shame because the area is beautiful. In fact, actress Elizabeth Taylor loved going there. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Plymouth, Montserrat. Plymouth, once the capital of Montserrat in the Caribbean, is often referred to as Pompeii of the Caribbean. Why? Well, in 1996, a volcano erupted, causing a mass evacuation. A few months later, some residents returned, but were welcomed with another eruption. On June 25, 1997, this eruption killed 19 residents and destroyed the island's airport, trapping many others from fleeing. Eventually, Plymouth was evacuated again, but this time, no one dared to return. Everything was destroyed. In fact, 80% of the town is currently covered in ash. Pictures show homes completely buried with only their roofs sticking out. It's quite sad and scary. Moving on to number 4, we have Centralia. Centralia is an abandoned town located in Pennsylvania. It was once a populated town, however, a lot of residents were forced to leave due to unsafe living conditions. This all started after a coal fire ignited underground. This fire has been burning for almost 50 years. And it's predicted to continue on for another 200 years. As a result of this fire, tons of sinkholes have formed, hot smoke is released underground, and carbon monoxide has filled some residents' basements. In some parts of the town, it's said that the ground beneath them have reached up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 400 degrees Celsius for us Canadians. Now, the US government is trying to erase any history of this city. They took away any signs directing people to this town, removed the town's zip code, and forced most of the residents out, except for 7 residents that are happy living in their deadly town and refuse to move out. In our 3rd spot, we have the Island of Dolls, aka the island I never want to visit. Located in Mexico City, the Island of Dolls is full of dolls hanging from trees and buildings. If that's not bad enough, these dolls have been there for so long that they are covered in dirt, cobwebs, and insects, making them look that much more terrifying. Now, you're probably wondering how this place came to be. Clearly, it's not Annabelle or Chucky's private island resort, though it could be. So back in the 1950s, a man named Don Julian started to hang dolls from trees as a way to protect himself against evil spirits. Paranormal things kept happening to him there, so he would hang dolls everywhere with the idea that they would scare the souls of the deceased. He spent more than 50 years hanging dolls. Some were found in the garbage, some were missing limbs. Did not matter. If it was a doll, it got hung up all around the island. Now it's abandoned and looks like something straight out of a horror movie. Coming in at number 2, we have Wittenoom, Australia. Located north-northeast of Perth, Australia, Wittenoom is considered one of Australia's deadliest towns. And you would think it would have to do with Australia's massive and deadly insects, but surprisingly not. In fact, it's because of its blue asbestos. In 1937, blue asbestos was discovered in the city's gorge. Years later, miners were unearthing tons of asbestos from the ground. It wasn't until 1978 that the government started pushing people out of their homes. They realized how deadly it was for them to be living there. It was increasing their risk for cancer. And in some cases, people were already developing lung cancer just from living there. It would cost the town about $2.43 million to rid the town of asbestos. So instead of doing that, they just shut the town down completely. In 2006, the government turned off the power to the town and had its name removed from maps and road signs. In fact, all roads that once led to the town are now closed off. If you do choose to enter the town, you will find tons of huge warning signs advising you to turn back. And in our number 1 spot, we have Pripyat, Ukraine. This is probably the most famous abandoned city on the list. So Pripyat was a city in Ukraine that had a population of 49,000 individuals. However, on April 27, 1986, all residents were forced to evacuate following the Chernobyl disaster. Pripyat was the most affected by the Chernobyl nuclear disaster since they were the closest to the power plant. They were the ones most exposed to the radioactive chemicals. A once beautiful city was left abandoned in just 3 hours. Due to the radiation, the city will be left untouched for thousands of more years until it's safe enough to return.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky is a former tuberculosis hospital that is said to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. The hospital was operational from 1910 to 1961 and housed thousands of patients suffering from tuberculosis during that time. The building's dark history, which includes reports of medical experiments, neglect, and mistreatment of patients, has led to numerous reports of paranormal activity. Visitors to the abandoned hospital have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even seeing ghostly apparitions, including the ghosts of former patients and nurses. The most famous ghostly sighting at Waverly Hills is that of a nurse who is said to have taken her own life in one of the hospital's rooms. Her ghost has been seen by many visitors and is said to be one of the most active spirits in the building. The sanatorium's eerie atmosphere and dark history continue to attract ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Prince Edward Heights Mental Hospital. The Prince Edward Heights Mental Hospital, located in Prince Edward County in Ontario, was a psychiatric hospital that operated from 1913 to 1999. The hospital was known for its very controversial treatments and overcrowding, and there are many stories of patient mistreatment and harm. When the hospital closed, it left behind a dark and eerie legacy. The abandoned hospital has become a popular spot for urban explorers and paranormal investigators, with many reports of strange noises, unexplained occurrences, and ghostly apparitions. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former patient who is said to roam the halls, as well as the sound of footsteps, screams, which is horrifying, and other unexplained noises. Visitors to the hospital have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair, and many believe that the spirits of former patients still haunt the abandoned building today. In our number 8 spot today, we have Bannack. Bannack, Montana is a ghost town that was once a bustling gold mining community in the late 1800s. Today, however, the town is a popular destination for ghost hunters and urban explorers due to its reputation for being haunted. Visitors to Bannack have reported seeing ghostly apparitions, hearing unexplained noises, and feeling a very strong spiritual energy throughout the town. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former sheriff who was killed in the line of duty, as well as the ghost of a girl who is said to have died from illness in one of the town's homes. Others have reported feeling a strong sense of unease and fear, particularly in the town's abandoned schoolhouse. Very creepy. While the exact reason for Bannack's haunting remains a mystery, many believe that the town's violent past, which includes the numerous killings and deaths that occurred in its heyday, have left behind a lingering spiritual energy that continues to haunt the town today. In our number 7 spot today, we have the CPR Hospital. The abandoned CPR Hospital is located in Saskatchewan, here in Canada, my home province, and it's a different kind of CPR than you might be thinking. In its past life, this hospital was once a hospital hospital for Canadian Pacific Railway workers in the early 1900s. The hospital closed its doors in the 1980s and has been abandoned ever since. Today, the hospital is a popular spot for ghost hunters and urban explorers, with many reports of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings. Visitors to the hospital have reported hearing strange noises, including the sound of footsteps and the disembodied voices of former patients and staff. Some have even reported seeing apparitions, including the ghostly figure of a former nurse who died in a tragic accident. The hospital's haunting history is thought to be linked to the many tragedies that occurred during its time as a working hospital. Whether or not the hospital is truly haunted remains up for debate, but its eerie atmosphere and mysterious past continue to draw visitors from far and wide. In our number 6 spot today, we have Bodie. Bodie, which is located in California, is a former mining town that is now a ghost town and state historic park. The town was established in 1859 and was the home to a thriving gold rush community until the early 1900s when the mines began to close. The town's isolation and very harsh living conditions made it a very difficult place to live, and it was eventually abandoned. The remaining buildings, which have been preserved in a state of quote arrested decay, make it a popular spot for tourists and ghost hunters alike. Visitors to Bodie have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even, of course, seeing a ghost or two. Some believe that the town's violent history, which includes shootouts and executions, has caused it to become haunted. Others believe that the spirits of former residents still roam the streets, unable to let go of their former lives. Bodie's haunting history and well-preserved buildings make it a fascinating but very eerie place to visit. In our number 5 spot today, we have Val-Jalbert. The abandoned village of Val-Jalbert, located in Quebec, Canada, was once a thriving pulp mill town in the 1920s. However, after the mill closed in the 1940s, the town was abandoned and left to decay. Today, the village is a very popular spot for tourists and explorers, with many reports of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings. Visitors to Val-Jalbert have reported feeling a sense of unease and hearing strange noises, including whispers and footsteps. I think that whispers is like the worst. No, voices is one thing, whispers is worse. There are also rumors of a ghostly figure that haunts the village's church, as well as other apparitions that have been spotted throughout the abandoned buildings. Many people believe that the town's tragic history, which includes a devastating fire and several deaths, has caused it to become haunted. The abandoned village of Val-Jalbert is a fascinating and eerie place to visit, and its haunting history and ghostly tales continue to intrigue visitors from around the world. In our number 4 spot today, we have Six Flags New Orleans. Six Flags New Orleans, of course located in Louisiana, was once a very popular theme park that closed its doors after Hurricane Katrina devastated the area in 2005. Since then, the park has been abandoned and left to decay, leading many to believe that it is haunted. Visitors to the park have reported hearing strange noises and seeing ghostly apparitions, including the ghost of a former employee who is said to have died on the property. There are also rumors of ghostly figures that can be seen walking through the abandoned park at night. While many of the park's attractions have been dismantled at this point, some of the structures still stand, including the abandoned roller coasters and the very creepy, dilapidated clown head that once served as the park's entrance. The park's haunting history and eerie atmosphere have made it a very popular destination for urban explorers and ghost hunters alike. However, visitors are warned that the property is unsafe and trespassing is strictly prohibited. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Central Experimental Farm. Located in Ottawa, Ontario, this farm is a research facility that has been in operation since 1886. However, despite its scientific purpose, the farm has a reputation for being haunted. Visitors to the farm have reported seeing ghosts, hearing unexplained noises, and also feeling an eerie presence. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former farm worker who died on the property, as well as the ghost of a woman who is said to haunt the farm's historic farmhouse. There are also rumors of a ghostly horse-drawn carriage that can be seen driving through the farm's fields. While the exact reason for the farm's haunting remains unknown, many believe that the many tragedies that have occurred on the property, including accidents and deaths, have left behind a lingering spiritual energy. The Central Experimental Farm is a fascinating and eerie location, and its haunting history and the ghostly tales surrounding it continue to intrigue intrigue visitors from around the world. In our number 2 spot today, we have Centralia. Located in Pennsylvania, this town is often referred to as one of the gateways to hell. That is due to the fire that spread in an underground coal mine underneath the town in 1962. The fire, which is believed to have been started by a trash fire that spread to the coal seam, has been burning for over 60 years and has caused the town to be evacuated due to toxic fumes and the risk of collapse. As the fire still blazes underground, it causes the smoke and poisonous gases to rise up from the ground, not only causing an eerie appearance, but also a very serious health hazard. The temperatures can be so hot in the area that one guy's backyard was measured at 626 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes the fire will also burn through supports underground, which in the end turns into a sinkhole. This has caused pets, wildlife, and residents to unsuspectingly get swallowed up into the hole. In 1984, the US government ordered a total evacuation of the town, but a handful of residents refused to leave and even went to court over the right to stay in the town for as long as they live. The abandoned buildings, cracked and buckled roads, and just eerie silence makes it a popular spot for urban explorers and paranormal enthusiasts. Some believe that the town's dark history combined with the ongoing fire has caused the area to become haunted. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is known for its haunting history. The prison was operational for almost 150 years from 1829 until its closure in 1971, and it was once the home to some of the country's most notorious criminals, including Al Capone. The prison's imposing Gothic architecture and innovative design, which placed an emphasis on solitary confinement and rehabilitation, made it one of the most famous prisons of its time. However, its harsh conditions and notorious history also make it a popular spot for ghost hunters and people who love all things paranormal. Visitors have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even seeing ghosts, including the ghost of a guard who was killed by an inmate. Some even claim to have been touched or pushed by unseen forces. The prison's eerie atmosphere and dark history continue to fascinate as well as frighten visitors to this day.
Coming in at number 10, we have Tallahassee Mall, Tallahassee, Florida. Here's one that's holding on by the skin of its teeth. In fact, this mall was shut down in 2011, but a company saw this as a great opportunity to get some money and they bought back up the lease. So this place should be abandoned, but someone out there thought a dying mall was a great investment. I don't know what was going on through their head. If I was trying to make some profit, I don't think I would look at a place that is being propped up by GameSpot and Toys R Us. I'm sure post-COVID that this mall just got launched into the dust and the whole area is just a wasteland. Coming at number 9, we have the North Bridge Mall, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The YouTubers Proper People love to go around and explore abandoned buildings, and malls are no exception. They usually go through the states to find new places to explore, and this time they were heading through a mall and ran into some pretty interesting things. The whole place is blown out. Looks like a bomb went off. All the windows are smashed in and everything is ripped out of the stores. They should really rent this thing for horror movies because the whole thing has like an end of the world vibe. Certain areas of the roof were caved in, and I think there's broken glass on every inch of that mall. At one point they get confronted by a security guard who tells them that they need to get out of the broken down mall because apparently they were trespassing. They managed to convince them that they need to go back and get equipment before they leave to keep exploring the mall. So much of the stuff in the mall is dated because it has been closed down for so long. It actually would be fun to go through and pillage out a bunch of the decade-old material to decorate your house. You could give it this pulled out of time vibe. Coming in at number 8, we have the South China Mall. Here's a mall that you might want to stay away from because if you go too deep into it, you might end up missing. Not because there's some crazy serial killer in there who wants to wear your face like a mask. Well, there might be. I haven't done my own investigative work, but just the size of this will blow your mind. The thing is 9 million square feet. Holy cow, that's a massive space that's being used for nothing. The mall was thrown up by a billionaire who got rich with a certain brand of instant noodles. Not a bad idea. Build a mall, you'll be making money off the rent, and then you could sell noodles in the food court. Brilliant! Well, it turns out no one wanted to go to this massive mall because the place shut down not long after it opened. And in case you were wondering, the dude is still a billionaire, which is the kind of rich you want to get to, where you can drop a ton of money making a massive mall and then have it fail and not even worry about it. Coming in at number 7, we have the Steph Lawless Mall. Now, I couldn't get the name for this mall because YouTuber Steph Lawless doesn't mention what mall he is visiting in the comments, in the description or in the video itself, but the whole thing looks like a massive death trap. That looks like a place where you'd find a bunch of dead bodies, and then they would come to life and do some sort of weird surgery on you to make them your leader. Well, that got dark quick. But the whole place is completely destroyed and has a terrible vibe. Not the place you want to host a birthday party. Coming in at number 6, we have El Con Center, Tucson, Arizona. Now this mall has a little bit of life left in it, but it's definitely going to die. The thing has slowly been going down like a fat kid down a water slide. He might get stuck a few times, but eventually he will hit the water, and when he does, it's going to be a big splash. The mall had store after store go out of business, and new places aren't that excited to grab a spot in the mall because the whole thing looks like a desolate wasteland. In fact, to save money and make the mall easier to navigate, their owner had part of the mall demolished. He basically had a crew come in and tear down all the stuff that wasn't being used so everyone could get to the last few shops a little bit better. That's like when you get bit by a zombie in a horror movie and they need to cut your arm off so you don't die from the infection and it doesn't spread. But let me tell you, when that happens in the movie, that guy always dies. Except for maybe in like Evil Dead when he gets the cool chainsaw arm. Coming in at number 5, we have the Fredericktown Mall, Maryland. YouTuber Chris Hopkins goes to an abandoned mall in Maryland. Before he gets into the mall, he sees squatters all set up on the outside of the mall, so there's a good chance that some people are using this mall for housing. A lot of the lights are still operating in the mall, so that means that some of the electrical could still be working, which would be awesome because there is a full arcade in this place. But I don't know how long you'd want to hang out in there because while walking through, they came across some swastikas spray painted on the walls with something written in German. That could mean that the place is being used as a Nazi meetup. I don't know how happy they would be to find you in their clubhouse. There was also some dude riding around the mall on a motorcycle popping wheelies. That sounds like a Mad Max gang member circling the mall to see if anyone's on his turf. Coming in at number 4, we have the Dixie Square Mall from Illinois. This mall was actually famous for a short time. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Blues Brothers? Well, if you haven't and you're a fan of music, you should check it out. But the mall was used for some of the movie. Everyone thought this would make the mall skyrocket to success, but it turns out crime is more powerful than fame. The violence in the area eventually led to the mall being shut down. Coming in number 3, we have Rolling Acres Mall, Ohio. If you want to see what nature will do to our structures when we are all dead and gone, this is a perfect thing to look at. The Rolling Acres Mall in Ohio stands as a monument to winter winning over man. The mall's roof has been ripped through by the harsh winters that the Ohio climate brings, which is kind of cool. If you visit this place in the wintertime, there will be snow that will pile up in the mall through the roof, and it looks like the area that you go in The Last of Us DLC where the helicopters crash to the roof. I very much like that. Coming in at number 2, the New World Mall, Thailand. If you're working on a building and it doesn't get done, most of the time you would think that it gets torn down. Well, that costs a lot of money too, so sometimes the building will just stand there and not go anywhere, and it just stands as a monument of what could have been. The shell of the New World Mall is pretty impressive. The whole building was supposed to be an 11-story tall mall and was said to be one of the largest malls in the world. It would have been a bustling tourist attraction as well as a place for foreign investors to dump some money into the country. But what ended up happening is partway through the building process, it was discovered that the building crew wasn't following most of the regulations put in place to keep the building safe, and this led to the whole thing being shut down. That was over 40 years ago. A big problem with that was that the builders never finished the roof, so rain started to pool in the basement of the mall. This led to a massive mosquito infestation that would spread out to the surrounding areas. How this was dealt with was fish were released into the water to consume all of the mosquitoes. You can now go down there to see a bunch of cool fish if you want. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Croples Shopping Center, Mexico City. The YouTuber Fearless and Far goes to check out one of the coolest abandoned malls I have ever seen in my life. This thing has a whole Greek mythology theme going on, which makes you think that there's going to be a Gorgon in the basement waiting to turn you into stone with her gaze, when in reality it would probably be just some crazy person with scraggly hair who would throw rocks at you. But the whole place was supposed to be in the style of a Middle Eastern bazaar, which is super cool, but the unorthodox style could have added to the reason why it got shut down. But there were also rumors that it was involved in a massive money laundering scam. The building has been shut down for 20 years and now is covered in broken glass and spray paint tags.
Alright, we're going to start off at number 10 now with the Pripyat Amusement Park. This is an abandoned park in Pripyat, Ukraine that was meant to be opened on May 1st, 1986. Unfortunately, just 5 days before that date, the nearby nuclear power plant at Chernobyl went into meltdown. Everyone in the area area was forced to evacuate the city. As with everything else there, the park was left just as it was. Radiation levels there have been among the highest levels recorded in the whole of Pripyat. Even today you will need special permission to get even close. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. This park in southern West Virginia was abandoned in 1966 after the accidental deaths of 2 children. A little girl in a pink ruffled dress died after climbing into the circling swing set. A little boy also drowned in the amusement park's swimming pond. Some say the park was cursed even before its creation, after being built on the ground where deadly murders took place between Native Americans and European settlers during the late 1700s. The park opens up sometimes for tours in the week before Halloween, and some people have sworn they've seen the little girl there in her dress, covered in blood and just staring at them. Next up at number 8 now, we have Spree Park. This is an abandoned park in Berlin that opened in 1969. At its height, the park attracted over 1.5 million people per year. It boasted a roller coaster, 2 game watercourses, a stage, a western town and an English village. By 1999 though, the park was struggling to cope with large debts. They increased the admission fee, but that only served to drive away visitors. By 2001, they entertained just 400,000 visitors a year. The park closed the following year. In the years since then, a fire devastated major parts of the park. It's thought that someone intentionally did this. These days, Spree Park is nothing more than a creepy, burnt out husk with no certain plans for the future. Next up at number 7 now, we have Six Flags New Orleans. When Hurricane Katrina struck the Caribbean and southern US states, it devastated a lot of places. One of them was the Six Flags amusement park in New Orleans. As you can see from these images, the damage was so immense that the owners were just forced to abandon it altogether. The only visitors to the site now are trespassers who rip fences and leave graffiti. The place is also home to boars, snakes and other animals that have taken advantage of the lack of human presence. Next up at number 6 now, we have Encore Garden. This abandoned park in Taiwan lies just east of Taichung City. It was extremely popular during the 1990s, attracting visitors from all around. Then, in unclear circumstances, the park just closed. Rumours spread about what the reason could be. Some say there was a serious accident on the huge Ferris wheel that the park was known for. Others maintained that an earthquake in 1999 caused damage that was just too serious to repair. Next up at number 5 now, we have Gulliver's Kingdom. This theme park was built in the shadow of Japan's Mount Fuji and was partially funded by the government. The ride centered around the story of Gulliver, a traveler who discovered an island full of tiny people. The park opened in 1997 but barely lasted 4 years. The reasons for its failure are cited as a lack of main attractions, but also its proximity to the notorious Suicide Forest, a place that earned its name from being a favoured suicide spot for people in Japan. At number 4 now, we have Okpo Land. This amusement park is on the outskirts of Okpo in South Korea. It was very popular during the 90s and became one of Asia's most famous amusement parks. The duck ride became a crowd favourite, but tragically people started getting seriously injured on it. Eventually someone died on it. There was outrage and Okpo Land offered no compensation or apology. In 1999, a little girl died after one of the duck carts derailed and capsized. The park was closed soon after that. The derailed cart that killed the girl was still left hanging over the edge. It became a popular site for urban explorers until it was demolished in 2011. At number 3 now, we have Daddy Park. Built in 1950, this was Belgium's first private amusement park, built for children of pilgrims visiting the nearby basilica. It was successful for many years, but that all came to an end in 2000. The Nautic jet ride was notoriously dangerous, but no improvements were ever made to it. In that year, a boy lost his arm on the ride. The park struggled on for a while, but closed down in 2002 for renovations. For whatever reason, those renovations never took place, and the park was abandoned, never to reopen again. Today, it remains almost as it was left. Parts of it were demolished, but many of the buildings and smaller attractions remain. Next up at number 2 now, we have Wonderland Amusement Park. This park in China was supposed to be the country's answer to Disneyland's Cinderella Castle. It was still in development in 2000 when the plug was pulled on the whole project. According to National Geographic, the developer, local government and farmers all could not agree on the value of the land, and so work was stopped while the castle was only half built. Despite the owners abandoning Wonderland Park, the locals did not. They still tend to the plants that grow around the castle and apparently use the castle itself as a communal activity centre. And finally at number 1 now, we have Joyland. This park in Kansas was once the largest in the state and boasted 20 rides for kids and adults alike. It ran for more than 50 years until 2004. That was the year a 13-year-old girl fell from the Ferris wheel and sustained major injuries. The park closed down to assess its own safety. Although it planned to open again in 2006, it never did. The owners have since demolished most of the major attractions.
So starting off this countdown, we have Ordo's Kangbashi, and I apologize, I know I'm going to butcher every single name on this list. Please give me a break, okay? I suck at pronunciations, especially cities that I've never been to. So this is the most famous ghost city in China and the world's largest ghost town. Located in Inner Mongolia, Ordo's Kangbashi was meant to be a modern city with a new style of architecture. There's tons of unique looking buildings, large stadiums, theaters, and big public spaces. It was actually called the Dubai of China. Just one problem. It lacks people. The city was built for 300,000 people, but only 70,000 ended up moving to live there. Then, after running out of funding, construction on the city just stopped. Nowadays, there are tons of unfinished and empty apartments. Now it's called a modern ghost town, a stillborn city and a failed utopia. If you travel the area, it is beautiful with its buildings, but the silence and the emptiness is very frightening. Not only that, but beneath the streets is a whole underground parking system, which will give you nightmares. It looks like a giant underground doomsday bunker. Moving on to number 9, we have Tianducheng. The Tianducheng is known for being a copycat of Paris. Seriously, it was designed to look like as if you are in Paris. The streets look just like the ones in France, and they have a replica of the Medici fountain. To top it all off, they even have their very own Eiffel Tower. But sadly, it wasn't as successful as they hoped. And now many of the buildings remain deserted. Now people think of it as a creepy version of France. Many visitors feel uneasy walking down the streets. The once beautiful city now has stores with cracked and worn paint, and has a bunch of creepy statues with eyes that look like they follow your every move. In fact, some stores are nothing more than walls that they painted to look like stores and storefronts with like windows with merchandise in the windows. Kinda weird, kinda creepy. In our 8th spot, we have Chang'an. On May 20th, 2011, the construction of the city of Chang'an in Yunnan was approved. 100,000 new apartments were built, but they have no occupants. You have enormous office buildings with no workers, big streets with no cars. Now it's considered one of the largest ghost towns in Asia. What's creepy is that sections of the city remain uncompleted. There are dirt roads all trashed with rubble. It literally looks like an apocalyptic area. It's very creepy, especially when it's dead silent and all you can hear is the wind whistling through the abandoned buildings. Coming in at number 7, we have the Guangdong province. The Guangdong province is home to tons of abandoned villages, but the one I want to talk about is the village of Dakito. This village is known to have a ghostly presence, and it's said to be haunted, but there's hardly any information out there on it. So I don't know what exactly happened there or why it's abandoned, but all I know is that something sinister haunts the land. Coming in at number 6, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance, but more than 22 buildings are still unfinished, and there are no citizens working inside the tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as the following: "There's just nobody there. It's like having a good-for-nothing child." His words, not mine. He says at night, the area is 10 times creepier, with brightly lit roads, but no one driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards him, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? I have no idea, but he's terrified of the area and thinks it's haunted. We're now on our 5th and halfway mark with Dandong New District. The new district of Dandong features a giant shopping mall, huge government offices, a basketball stadium, and 60+ apartment towers. There's even a huge Ferris wheel. It seems like a really impressive city until you actually go there and find that it's all just for show. The Ferris wheel doesn't even work, and no one lives there. So this city is actually part of a border zone between North Korea. The Globe and Mail states, and I quote, "Part of the lure of the Dandong New District was supposed to be its proximity to Sinuiju, the North Korean city on the opposite bank of the narrow Yalu River. But since it's so close, citizens were worried that they would be exposed to possible radiation from North Korea's nuclear tests. So now, no one really wants to live there." Making our way down the list at number 4, we have have Nanhui New City. Nanhui New City, formerly named Lingang New City, is located 60 kilometers southeast of downtown Shanghai. The city was said to become a mini Hong Kong, but as we know, that didn't happen. The construction of the city began in 2003 and was said to be done by 2020, but it's nowhere near completion, and some believe that it will never be completed. In fact, 8 university campuses were built, and it could house more than 800,000 people, but now it remains abandoned. In fact, it's said that in order to build the city, one homeless man's shelter was destroyed in the process, and with nowhere to go, he committed suicide. People believe that he now will haunt the area and whoever decides to live there. In our third spot, we have Cafe Dien. Construction of the city began in the early 2000s. It was planned to be the solution to Beijing's pollution problem. It was going to be an eco-city, but the project was abandoned due to lack of government support and funding issues. It was built to hold millions of people, but only a few thousand live there. You got locked up abandoned hotels and unfinished buildings. One woman said, and I quote, "I was very sad when I saw how underdeveloped it was. I went back crying all the way." But due to the city's high amount of abandoned buildings, it attracts a lot of urban explorers. But sadly, a group of explorers died after a structural collapse in one of the buildings they were exploring. In our second spot, we have Lanzhou New Area. Built in a sandy plateau area, some parts of the city literally look like you're in a desert. So when you first enter the city, you'll see a huge sign that says, "Welcome to the Oasis City," but it looks nothing like an oasis. The welcome sign looks like it leads to nothing. It looks very barren. But in some areas of the city, you will notice that there are replicas of the Parthenon and the Great Sphinx of Giza. And that's pretty cool, but they're still under construction. So in order to create this city, hundreds of sandy hills were bulldozed down, and some mountains were even cut down. There are some buildings, but it mainly looks like a huge sandstorm just took place and then engulfed most of the buildings. Now, some people do live there, but it's still considered a ghost city as it houses far less than anticipated. Legend goes that the ancient Egyptian god Khafre is cursing this area for having a replica of his Sphinx. Most researchers believe that the Sphinx was meant to act as a guardian for the pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid is located beside it. So now, Khafre is mad and has made sure that the construction will never be completed and that it will never be a successful city. And in our number 1 spot, we have Miexi Lake City. I know for sure I pronounced that name wrong. The construction of the city began in 2007 and it was meant to be a highly sustainable city. The whole thing was designed to be eco-friendly and low carbon dependent. The project was described as this, and I quote, "Water is the primary element of design and acts as the heart and center of the master plan." They were going to have a huge lake that was going to be the main source of transportation. So people were going to be boating around, which was said to reduce pollution. And not only that, there were going to be canals that connected you to around the city. They expected a population of 206,000 people living there, but it was never really completed and is now an abandoned project. I mean, it was a pretty cool idea, but I don't know how many people are going to just love boating around instead of driving. Now, the city looks pretty beautiful and not creepy at all. Then again, rumor has it that the lake it was built near has been the site of multiple drownings. But of course, the government thought that was going to be bad news for their city, so they did whatever they could to try and hide the past.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Moundsville Penitentiary. The eerie echo of evil emanates from the Moundsville Penitentiary in West Virginia, an institution notorious for its savage treatment of inmates. With hundreds of deaths recorded, many a grim tale cling to its damp walls. The most chilling among these is the quote-unquote Shadow Man, a phantom silhouette that roams the prison grounds. Patrons claim to have seen this spectral figure, believed to embody the heinous deeds committed within the penitentiary, darting across the walls before dissolving into thin air. As if this wasn't enough, spine-tingling laughter and spectral whispers resonate through the deserted corridors, a disconcerting reminder of the prison's gruesome past. All in all, visiting this prison is truly a haunting experience, and it's definitely not not recommended. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Kingston Penitentiary. The Kingston Penitentiary in Canada is the country's oldest prison, and it bristles with horrifying tales. The secret of this place lies in its inhumane past, where it was notorious for its cruel and unusual punishments. Aside from these stories of savage punishments, however, the penitentiary's most alarming secret lies in the tragic story of George Hewell, an inmate killed by his cellmates. According to legend, Hewell's spirit is trapped within the institution's chilling stone confines, his spectral presence witnessed around his former cell. This eerie manifestation only intensifies the sense of dread pervading this historic prison. Any way you spin it, this prison is definitely not suitable for your next tourist vacation. In our number 8 spot today, we have Patakan Prison. The Patakan Prison in Indonesia, infamous for wartime torment, holds a blood-curdling secret. This gruesome establishment is said to house a well where the bodies of those who faced unseen horrors at the prison were discarded. It's believed that the spirits of the tormented rise under the cloak of darkness, seeking retribution for their gruesome fate, and I have to say, could anyone blame them? There are so many stories of horrifying treatment. It's no wonder these tales go hand in hand with the tales of terrifying hauntings. Scary stories of spectral soldiers and the haunted faces of the deceased give the prison an ambiance that sends shivers down the spine of even the most intrepid explorer. In our number 7 spot today, we have Bodmin Jail. Across the pond in England, tucked away in the beautiful landscape, you will find Bodmin Jail. This brooding, centuries-old prison has a ghostly tale or two to chill even the bravest of souls. Built in the year 1779, its stone walls have seen more than their fair share of pain, suffering, and death, particularly from hanging. The jail's most unsettling tale is the ghostly apparition of Selina Wadge. Convicted for the unthinkable act of killing her own son, Selina paid the ultimate price for her crime at the end of the hangman's noose. However, her spirit appears to be bound to the place of her execution, unable to find rest in the afterlife. Visitors of the derelict prison often report sightings of Selina's mournful ghost, weeping inconsolably in the dank, chilling bowels of the building. Her spectral figure, awash with sorrow and regret, adds a bone-chilling layer to the already creepy aura of Bodmin Jail. The eerie silence of the prison seems to amplify her phantom cries, echoing through the hollow halls and sending shivers down the spine of anyone brave or foolish enough to explore this haunting relic of history. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Old Idaho Penitentiary. The Old Idaho Penitentiary, operational from 1872 to 1973, is steeped in a very dark past. The haunted secret in this one lies in the most unlikely of places, however, the prison's rose garden. Its rose garden holds a chilling secret, and it all starts with the garden being tended to by inmates on good behavior. This is all fine and well, and actually sounds like a moderately nice time, all things considered, but things take a very dark turn when you learn that this spot was also where several convicts were executed by hanging. Now, this has of course led to strange phenomena being reported around the rose garden, with spectral figures and ghostly faces appearing among the flowers. A sensation of despair and sorrow often overcomes visitors, and it is a chilling reminder of the lives cut short on that very spot. In our number 5 spot today, we have Fremantle Prison. In the land down under, amidst the serene, picturesque landscapes and crazy huge spiders, lies a monument to humanity's dark side, Fremantle Prison. Once a fortress for punishment, this stark sandstone monolith houses a terrifying secret deep within its dark, convoluted tunnels. The labyrinth beneath Fremantle was forged by the hands of the very inmates it imprisoned, with the chilling corridors bearing testament to the sweat, tears, and desperation of those who chiseled them from the hard, unyielding earth. These tight, suffocating passageways, eerily lit by occasional slivers of dim light, were the site of countless tragedies. Numerous prisoners met their untimely end within this grim maze, either through unfortunate accidents or desperate acts of self-destruction. However, it seems their spirits are far from being at peace. Today, the chilling echoes of the inmates' despair reveal reverberate through the tunnels. Unseen figures cast elusive, phantom shadows, their eerie presence sensed more often than seen, while an inexplicable chill permeates the air. I gotta say, haunted tunnels underneath an abandoned prison. It truly does not get more creepy than that. In our number 4 spot today, we have La Santé Prison. In the vibrant center of Paris, amidst the iconic landmarks and bustling cafes, stands an imposing structure with a sinister legacy. La Santé Prison. This foreboding edifice harbors a disturbing secret that makes its shadowy corners and dimly lit halls even more chilling. Its ghostly denizen is none other than the figure of a former warden, ominously dubbed with a nickname I can't even say here on YouTube, but what I will say is the name was inspired by his reign as warden, during which the prison witnessed an alarming surge in inmates taking their own lives, a morbid correlation that cemented his place in the prison's dreadful lore. Even now, his spectral presence is palpable, with visitors reporting the phantom echoes of his heavy footsteps clanging down the corridors and his whispers rustling like the chilling wind. These eerie manifestations serve as a stark reminder of the prison's horrifying past, ensuring that its gruesome legacy is never forgotten, but instead hauntingly alive. In our number 3 spot today, we have Ohio State Reformatory. Also known as Mansfield Reformatory, this spooky place is a former prison located in Mansfield, Ohio. It opened in 1896 and closed in 1990. While the prison is known for its feature in The Shawshank Redemption, the real horrors lie in its violent history and inhumane conditions, with reports of harm, bad conditions, and overcrowding. The prison is also rumored to be haunted, with many visitors reporting strange occurrences, such as cold spots, unexplained noises, and ghostly apparitions. One of the most famous ghosts said to haunt the prison is that of Helen Glatke, the wife of a former superintendent who died in a car accident outside the prison. Her spirit is said to still wander the prison, often appearing in the chapel or in the administration area. Another famous ghost is that of the quote ghost in the tower, believed to be the spirit of a former inmate who died in a tragic accident while working in the prison's bell tower. Visitors have reported hearing his screams and seeing his ghostly figure in the tower. In our number 2 spot today, we have Alcatraz. Welcome to the infamous Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, a desolate rock in the San Francisco Bay. In its active years, it held the likes of Al Capone, who is said to have played his banjo in the eerie silence. Abandoned in 1963, the echoing sounds of cell doors slamming shut still haunt the silent corridors. Visitors claim to hear ghostly whispers and footsteps, often attributed to the restless spirits of the prisoners who met untimely ends. Alcatraz most haunting secret? The chilling tale of Cell 14D, said to be the home to a malevolent entity. Prisoners claim to be tormented by a creature with glowing eyes. A visit to this cell leaves visitors feeling unnaturally cold, even on the warmest days. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary is located in Philadelphia, and of course it used to be a prison, but it is now an abandoned and extremely haunted house. This prison used to house some pretty big profile prisoners such as Al Capone, again, as well as Willie Sutton, but it was different from the American prisons we are used to now. This is because this prison was entirely separate incarceration. The inmates would live, sleep, eat, and everything else alone. When they were removed from their cells, they would have hoods placed over their heads as well. Considering all we now know about how detrimental isolation is, this of course must have taken an immense toll on the prisoners. Besides this, there were also some pretty gruesome and horrible punishments in this prison, such as having prisoners' tongues chained to their wrists. I'm not honestly even sure how you would do that, but apparently it was a thing. This prison now sees thousands of voluntary visitors every year, and there have been plenty of reports of creepy paranormal happenings. These include shadowy figures, hearing creepy laughter that doesn't belong to anyone living, and hearing footsteps throughout the prison. I feel like considering all that went on when the prison was still active, it truly does make sense that this building would be a haunted one. Whether haunted by their history or the spirits of former inmates, these prisons are a spine-tingling reminder of humanity's darkest chapter.